Hey everybody, I have a sponsor. It is Sagen Financial Group. They have this product called Relax Tax by Sagen Financial Group. And what you do is you submit your tax info online and it gets processed by one of their specialists. No unnecessary appointments, no calls unless you request one, completely on your schedule. And best of all, the listeners of the KAAMP get a 10% off code for Relax Tax by Sagan Financial Group. Just go to relaxtax.com. That is RELAXEDTAX.com and use coupon code KAAMP in the tax client intake form. Sagen Financial Group is in Chattanooga and they serve all 50 states. And part of the proceeds will go to directly supporting the KAAMP podcast. And I think that's awesome. So I'll put the link in the show notes. Just remember the KAAMP is your coupon code for 10% off for the Relax Tax by Sagen Financial Group. Also, thank you for listening, and I really appreciate it. All right, everybody. My name is Thomas. This is the newest, next, bravest episode of the KAAMP. That is the Knoxville Area Artist Network and Platform. If I could not kick my mic stand, that'd be great. And this is it today. We're doing the thing. Would you introduce yourself, friend?
Yes, my name is Josh Shorey. I'm an artist. I live here in Knoxville. I have a studio here in town called Bapo. And it's an art studio, and the mission of this studio is to create objects of extraordinary beauty. And so I make that these days. That's primarily sculpture, furniture, and lighting, which I make one of a kind pieces for commissioned for people. So people hire me to make things for them.
So it's on commission basis only. You don't have cool things sitting around. It's like, hey, I'm gonna call you and you're gonna make me something.
I do have cool things sitting around, but I don't sell them retail. I don't often sell things out of my studio. Sometimes people buy stuff out of my studio.
So you said things of extraordinary beauty?
Objects of extraordinary beauty.
Okay, so
yeah.
is that a tagline you settled on one day, or just like woke up in the middle of the night? It's like, that's it.
Well, I have a friend who has encouraged me to attempt to have a couple of short sentences that describe what I do. Artists have a hard time.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Yeah. And so I think I can say that, and that is true, and it encompasses enough of what I'm intending to do with the studio. And it also helps me when I'm talking to clients, kind of to describe myself. So.
It sounds really awesome.
Does it? Okay,
yeah,
great.
It does.
Thank you.
Keep that up. Whoever told you that was a good idea,
yeah,
did not lie to you.
Well, all right. Shout out to Stephen Friedlander, who we both know. I also, I did an MFA. They sort of encourage you to try to articulate. It's a big part of that process. So yeah, it's been I've been forced into that articulating for a while.
Well, it's fun, and it's even more fun when you can land on something accurate.
Yeah.
That feels good to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of things sound good that you don't like to say.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good.
No?
No, because part of the point of doing what I'm doing and managing my life this way is that I can follow my interests and my intuitions, and You know what I mean? So the moment you attempt to describe concretely what you're doing,
then it slips. Something
yeah,
happens.
you're sort of you can end up at cross purposes to yourself really quickly.
It's hard to quantify these things.
It is. Yeah.
So what is furnishings or lighting elements? Is that something that you settled on in your workflow, or those things you sought to make?
Oh, it's sort of part of it is that's what works. So I'm really interested in objects and materials and
the
form.
Functionality.
Yeah, the function. I mean, making a piece of furniture function isn't as hard as
As making it look right.
Yeah.
Whatever the right is.
Yeah. But basically, what happened? I think how this developed, it was sort of accidental. You know, I was in the MFA program in sculpture at the University of Tennessee. I've been sort of making things in one way or another for a really long time. But people started hiring me to make them furniture pieces. And then I guess I made some furniture pieces. Like I had an open question of like, what exactly is the difference between art and design? You know, like what's the difference between a sculpture and a coffee table? And I'm not sure, and I still don't know if there's an answer or even or if that's even a meaningful question. But it did happen that I was making those pieces, and then people were buying them, and that, like, I think it was kind of low-hanging fruit, but I was like, oh my God, this is great. I can exercise my curiosity and interest in form and material and objects.
The blessed microphone.
Oh, it's doing its thing.
Yeah, doing its thing. But continue, please.
I was just elated that I could do things that I was interested in already, you know, form, material, processes, and that people would trade me money for it.
Yeah.
And then I could keep doing it, you know, and do more. And so that's just that sort of took off. So I was really making just furniture for a while. And am I answering your question, or am I just going
yes
on?
And no,
okay,
please
okay.
continue.
All right.
That's always going to be my answer. So it's just that we're here for a very meandering conversation, and that's fine.
Yeah. So where I'm trying to get is to have maximum autonomy and resources to follow, you know, what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know, finding people, lighting kind of arrived in the last few years as another interesting line of inquiry for me, something just adding a new element to objects, I suppose. And so, you know, I've been finding clientele, people who want to buy those things, and that, you know, once I have a commission, part of what I build into those is like experimentation and prototyping. And so that gives me, you know, I cut myself out part of the budget, room to like figure out what the thing is going to be. And that's something the clients understand. I'm sort of generating a new thing for them. So they've
Mm-hmm.
seen things that I've done, and I can say, this is the kind of thing that I do. And every one of these, there was, you know, all we had was, I want something that goes here, essentially.
Yeah.
And this is what I came up with, and this is how I came up with it. And so the clients understand that there's an exploratory phase. And that's really where I get to have like my spontaneity and fun in the studio, and then you know, eventually, of course, I have to deliver something
Yeah.
that the people pay for. But the hope there is, you know, is for me the fun and interesting. Well, there's a lot of fun and interesting parts of it, but yeah, getting to make the things that people want and make the things that I want. That's kind of what I'm trying to.
Yeah, and finding that
accomplish.
in between or common ground is often joyous and frustrating, right?
Yeah, yes. So because the challenge is, what if I don't want to criticize anybody's. I won't. You know, I won't even give an example. Whatever the example.
I'm not asking for it.
Yeah, but it does happen that, somebody wants me to make something, and that's great, and then they send me, some images of things they've seen, and if those images are like, very, very different from what I think good work is.
Which I'm sure you've received plenty.
It has happened. What do you do there? That's tricky. Mm-hmm. I've done well, I think, figuring that out.
Well, if they come at you stylistically and it's something that's somewhat opposed or different than what your wheelhouse is,
yeah,
then, you got to take a crack at it sometimes because they want you to.
Well, the other part there is that.
But you can also say no.
Saying no, or it's the matching problem is tricky. There's also some people want me to be a custom fabricator, meaning they want to make all of the decisions and which is fine, but it's not optimal. And so if I don't have to take those jobs on, I don't, and there's like a kind of sometimes a lengthy figuring out stage at the beginning.
I believe it.
And the other thing is, sometimes with clients, so I worked in a lot of trades and, built houses and remodels and just a million other things. But one of the things I find is that I've seen people go through DIY syndrome, which is once people do the work themselves on their house, they now have a new appreciation for the tiny little details. Mm-hmm. And they are now burdened with their knowledge of the little details and all the decisions that they made. And somebody will kind of you'll come in, they're like, you're like, wow, you did a great job on this kitchen. They're like, but if you stand, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But if you see the light bouncing off this one thing like this, it reflects over here.
Right.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm also guilty of such things.
Yeah.
So what was your creativity like growing up? What'd you get into as a child, a young adult, college?
Kind of typical. I never had any aspirations to be an artist, and I didn't have any exposure really to the arts outside of maybe, the standard music and film.
Where'd you grow up?
I sort of split my childhood between Maine and Massachusetts.
Okay, so not a vastly different geographic area.
No. Well, they're culturally more different than you could probably imagine.
No, I believe that.
Yeah.
And I've been told things along those lines.
Yeah. Well, I lived in a really extremely rural agricultural community in Maine, and then moved to kind of like a commuter town in Massachusetts, where nobody was from there.
Right. And everybody drives 45 minutes to go to work.
Or more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see, my childhood. I mean, it was comic books were big. Mm-hmm. For me, and sort of, I can remember, reading the X-Men, and so I draw, right, little things, and I look at the X-Men or whatever, Spawn, I don't know if you're a comic books guy.
Todd McFarlane writes excellent Spawn comics. That's one of my favorite characters.
Okay. And just being completely perplexed, it's a magic trick. I have no idea how they're able to do this.
How does this become that?
And that was pretty well, when you're a kid, it's just exciting. It's like magic, So there was that. There was also, so I traced some of this stuff back. It's not exactly art or creativity, but my brother, I have an older brother, so I followed after my older brother a lot.
So it's his fault.
Well, he had these books by a naturalist guy named Tom Brown Jr. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. He grew up in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, and just somehow, maybe from a friend's grandfather or something, had a little overlap with some existing Native American community there in that part of the world. And so he ended up writing all these books on like, you know, nature observation, tracking, wilderness survival, all that kind of stuff. And we had a lot of woods behind my home. And so it was like learning how to engage with the natural world and to learn about it and the systems of the world. And we would sleep out, you know, when I was 10 or 11, my brother and I would sleep out in the woods all year round. Mm-hmm. We would build shelters, kind of constructing. That was like...
Just whatever was around, natural materials, everything you could find.
Yeah, they had this, there was like this thing called a debris hut, you know, and it was sort of like if you're stuck out there, right? Imagine you're stuck out and you've got to like make your own shelter. It's basically like find a log stick and lay that over something and then pile as much branches and leaves and everything else on top of that as you can.
Yeah. Eventually it'll be reasonably dry.
Yeah. We would do that. And then, you know, we like ended up building sort of these like heat reflecting walls for the fire.
Mm-hmm. Stacking some stones on the opposite side of the fire.
Yeah. Warming stones in the fireplace and then like burying them under where you're going to sleep.
Amazing way to stay warm at night.
It really works.
And I'd
still
imagine
do that.
in colder climates, I bet that's a trick.
Yeah. And this was like, you had a really good sleeping bag if you had like the $30 one from Walmart or whatever, you know. We didn't have any waterproof clothing or anything. And so it doesn't track exactly with like childhood creativity, but I think it was a...
Well, that's a creative, hands-on, use what you got scenario. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's not creative because you made everything from scratch every time.
Yeah.
Or mostly.
Yep.
You had to use what was around. Yeah. And that's it.
Yep.
So I think that's wonderfully creative.
Yeah.
And you out the house. I'm sure mom and dad appreciated that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, it's funny. You know, I think for so long I was like, wow, my parents are so cool because they let me and Justin's my older brother, they let us just go, you know, and looking back, I'm like, oh, right.
This is how you get peace.
Yeah.
I also grew up in a very rural place, you know, Hancock County in East Tennessee. It's like 90 miles northeast of here. So I wasn't one of those latchkey kids like come home when the streetlights come on because there were no streetlights.
Right.
so it's just like, you know, when we cook dinner, if you're not here, then you miss dinner.
Yeah.
So, you know, judge wisely.
And was everybody else kind of the same around you? The other kids and families were the same?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in high school, a lot of us started playing paintball out in the woods, you know, because we could buy paintball guns, had a little money doing jobs and whatnot, driving around and stuff. And, you know, camping, caving, being in the woods, playing paintball, you know, just coon hunting, all the things. I did a lot of that. Like, yeah, it's a fun way to be outside.
Yeah.
And as a parent myself now, I know that's a great way to maintain the peace.
That's
Get the kids out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a note on my parents. I want to brag on them real quick. I have 3 siblings.
Okay.
There's like 3 years between each of us, roughly. So there was like 12 years of teenagers in my parents' house, something like that. It was enough where you would think a parent would commit murder, and we all survived.
That's great.
So I bless them. They're saints.
Yeah. Shout out to
my parents
Mom and
are
Dad.
wonderful. Yeah, they didn't kill a single one of us.
That's great. And everybody's still alive and not in jail. And
well, jail's a different story, but we're all alive. My brother makes me seem like a golden child, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
And my sister works for the government, so she's doing fine.
Okay, great. Great.
But yeah, you know, you had to interface with nature and do with what you had, and you know, if you wanted to have fun and you didn't have your tools on you, then you had to figure out where the fun came from or what form it was going to take. And yeah, I understand what that's like.
Yeah.
Once I got a 4-wheel drive, it was a little different.
Yeah.
But I ended up deeper in the woods than I ever needed to be.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
I learned how to get 4-wheel drive vehicles stuck really right away.
Yeah, I had a 95 Jeep Cherokee and only ever got it stuck once.
Nice.
And that's because the mud hole, high centered on the rut in the mud hole, so my diffs were dug in and my wheels were off the ground.
Yeah.
So I had to get yanked out backwards by a tractor.
Yeah.
Go me.
That'll do it.
Every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I managed to get stuck in snow. That was my.
Oh, that's worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a north thing. I don't really get stuck around in snow down here that much.
Yeah.
So, that period of your life was like what, middle school into high school? Where you're playing out in the woods and sleeping out all the time?
Yeah.
You and your brother?
Yep.
So, what changed between high school being in the woods and college sculpture stuff?
Oh, gosh. What changed?
Or what didn't change, if that's a shorter list?
Think about that. Well, let's see. So I kind of stumbled into like fine art. I went to college and majored in literature, and I think I was not really ready to take college seriously, and it was expensive.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what that's like too.
So I stopped going to college, and then just through some meandering around, I ended up working at a jet engine repair facility in Georgia that was owned by a huge multinational corporation that is now Raytheon.
Mm-hmm. Defense contract stuff.
Yeah, ours was
that civilian?
Civilian aircraft. But they would give you time off of work every week if you were enrolled in a degree.
Oh, so they made sure you got your homework done.
Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of cool. They were actually really, at that time anyway, really, really pushed the value of continuing education.
Nice.
And so I think I worked there for a couple of years. I finished an associate's degree just because it was the fewest credits. Oh, and then I could keep going. And so I enrolled in the art school at a Columbus State University, Columbus, Georgia, which, I did not know at the time, but was receiving, like, the art department was receiving major investment from the university and the city because the university moved art, theater, and music all to facilities like on the Riverwalk downtown as part of a joint sort of revitalization program.
That's cool.
And they brought in all these great professors from great schools who were fairly young and really energetic. And so I all of a sudden I was in this really kind of amazing, really vibrant academic art community. And I just, became obsessed with it. And yeah, my art education changed my life. My undergraduate art education changed my life. I learned that I could learn, and I learned that I could do things, and I learned that I could sort of go from nothing to something with just my will and my, and asking the right questions and spending enough time. I didn't know that about myself, really.
Yeah, before then.
Yeah.
Because were you not exposed, or were you never pressed to try? Or both?
Both. I mean, I feel like up until that, I was almost like a default person,
A default person.
Yeah.
Just you bebopping doing stuff.
Well, I mean, I had, my dad and my older brother had big personalities, and I think I just was like, oh, I'll just do what they do, or I'll be like them, really. And I don't think it, I think it was the art program. I went through that process of like individuation and self-discovery and all that, that a lot of people get to go through in college or around that time. And I just kind of, I just fell in love with the learning and the doing, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a whole explosion for me.
So it turned your life and your logic inside out.
Totally.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I was raised in a really kind of fairly closed, conservative, religious milieu. And so getting out into the world and...
I like that word.
Milieu.
That's a good one for this context, yeah.
getting out and exposed to people who I didn't know anything about, and like being surprised by what people were like and what they were capable of and what they thought about me, and you know what I mean? All of it was just
when you figure out how big and small the world is
oh
at
gosh.
the same time.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Moving out and removing myself from some conservative and terribly religious social circles was one of the healthiest things I've ever done for myself.
Yeah.
So I know what that's like.
Yeah.
For sure I know what that's like.
Was that coming here for you, or did you go somewhere else?
Well, no, I moved from Sneedville to Knoxville in 2011, I think. 2011, 2012. And Hancock County per capita is the most churched county in the United States. So I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but there are a very high ratio of churches to people in this place, and it just happens to be higher than everywhere else. There's even a Catholic church, and nobody goes there.
Right.
But yeah, that was a big deal. And I never fell in line with religion or that ideology or any formal anything in that realm, really.
Yeah.
So it was always like I was the black sheep in the room, or obviously everybody knew I didn't want to be there. And once I became hard up enough about my preferences that people didn't take me to these places, it became a lot easier. But yeah, I had a similar awakening once I was able to form social circles and express myself in manners that suited me and what I was trying to do, and it helped a lot. I would hate to think how I would be otherwise, if I had stayed or if I hadn't went through the process of growth that I've used to get here. I really don't want to know who I would be without it.
Yeah.
Sounds like a no fun version of me. I would say a lot of things would have stayed the same about me and how I treat people, but how I think and how I perform with my creativity would never be what it is now if I hadn't. And I'm really thankful for what I do now.
Yeah.
Because it makes me really happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I greatly enjoy my creative outputs now, for sure.
Interesting. Are you a Star Trek The Next Generation fan? Did you ever watch that show?
When it was on, I never sought it out, but good things have come from that media.
Okay. I bring it up because I've been rewatching it. I'm like home with the baby a lot, and
Dragon Ball was what I did. Dragon Ball and the Clone Wars.
Well, I just saw an episode yesterday where, due to a malfunction with a transporter and, some other, I don't know, some kind of force field, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, jargon, space jargon.
It turned out that a transporter-induced copy of Will Riker, Commander Riker, was trapped on a planet.
A transporter-induced copy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was trapped on a planet for some number of years. So it's split into two separate lives, and then they go back to the planet for some reason. So they rescue the copy of Riker, and then Riker has to deal with, himself, another version of himself, and they hate each other.
Of course.
Which I thought was really true to life. And they sort of despise each other's, I don't know. It had me thinking about that. I wonder about that sometimes, like, there's a sort of like default logic to saying, like, imagining what might have been. But it isn't, it's totally fictional. There is no what might have been. There's only what is. And it's kind of a strange habit of mind to have, like
to ponder on what could have been.
Yeah, so I think, that seems to be the thing that we humans are able to do, is to imagine possible futures. And
we can what if ourselves to death.
Yeah. But the utility of that is forward into the future. Mm-hmm. But we also do this thing, some people do anyway, of sort of running it backwards. Like, had I made a different decision at some point in the past, I don't know. There's something like, I noticed that habit, and it seems like a really dangerous thing to do.
But it's like going to WebMD.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and this has come up in conversation, here before, and I totally think that's some kind of ethical malpractice.
Yeah.
Because it's really slippery slopes. Because, you can rethink a conversation you had with somebody 6 years ago and remember, oh, God, this is the thing I should have said. Or,
right.
This is what they needed to hear at the time. And, oh, God, I just feel terrible because that's not how it went. And, any scenario in that vein. And I think being human, one is capable of doing that to themselves quite a lot in ways that isn't necessarily healthy.
Yeah. It's is there a word for that? I feel like there should be a word for it. You know what I mean? So that we can all agree.
I have no idea what it is.
Agree that it's a bad thing. And so when you start to do it, you can just sort of, we know we have all kinds of bad habits that we have words for, and you can be like, gosh, I'm whatever.
Yeah.
I'm being rude.
Well, when I recognize these things in my own patterns of thought, I just generically call it a feedback loop. And once I recognize that's what I'm doing, I do something else,
Yeah.
So if I get stuck in some kind of circular logic, I try to break it and go do some shit, something else, dear God.
Yeah, it would, and it seems like it would be the strength that the strong method would be like the instant you are reconsidering the past.
You got to stop.
I mean? To stop.
You can't change it. It's wasted energy at that point.
I mean, I think it's useful. Okay, let me think about this. It's useful.
You have to be objective. If you're going to look back, you have to be, in my opinion, you have to be objective.
But you can't.
Because it's your experience.
Because it's your experience.
Yeah.
You can analyze how things transpired and then say to yourself, well, in the future, you know what I mean? In a similar event, I will attempt to, to not allow that to happen again. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird little habit of mine. Well, why did I bring this up? We can talk about something.
I mean, when I find difficult thoughts or difficult feelings in my process or in my person, wherever it may be, I really try to lean into them and sit with them and see why or how I got there. Mm. And if I give that notion enough intent and proper energy, then I can usually figure it out. Like if something upsets me in some way, then I'm going to recognize that I'm upset. What am I going to do with this? So I'm not just going to sit here and be upset about it. Do I need to learn something? I probably need to learn something if I'm upset about it. So what is the thing that I should learn from this? And it's the same with my creative efforts too. I'll have some ruined piece of shit in the corner and just be like, what did I do wrong here and how can I not do that again? Or I'll remember my thought process on how I worked through that and be like, well, this idea branched off and it became that thing. So if I do this a little differently, it won't end up looking like that. Mm. So that's how I try to lean into these things. So like you were saying, it's forward looking, even though you might be thinking about something that is definitely in the past. But I feel like that kind of introspection is really healthy as a person, but It's also really healthy as a creative person, because it allows you to look at whatever the problem is from angles you wouldn't naturally gravitate to. And you as a person have your own biases. I have my own biases. They're inherent to us as people. We have to know we have those so we can think around them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's terribly important to keep people out of ruts, just in general. So there has to be some objectiveness to your thought, even though it's yours and you're biased and it's in your head. But you can't give yourself the WebMD cancer by, continuously thinking about the negative thing and the what ifs. Yeah,
there's the rub, right? When you're particularly when you're engaged in a creative act, where, when do you know when to stop analyzing and start doing, and, or when do you know when to stop doing and start analyzing it?
Or how do you know just when to stop?
Stop anything? Never. The answer is never.
Well, the point where if I'm scared, I touch it again and I ruin it is when I stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that happen to you?
It does.
You have that habit?
3 out of 5 pieces, I'll look at it and be like, I don't know what to do next. I probably should do nothing.
Huh.
And that's part of my whole does this have enough detail? Does it look the way I want? Did I achieve the overall shape I wanted? You have to be analytical to come to a conclusion about these things. But also sometimes it's not so analytical and it's just a feeling. Mm. And damn, if that's not confusing sometimes. Mm-hmm. So this leads me to ask, the forms and shapes and materials of your work, is generally pretty simple when you look at it from afar.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get up close to your work, you see that a lot of things have facets or are scalloped or wireframe, textured in some way that you wouldn't notice. So one of the things that I enjoy about your work is that they have those different modalities. So specifically, your candle stands, long skinny sculptures, they're hourglass shaped, come in different heights, different widths, but they all have the same sort of elongated hourglass theme to them. And you can see that from across the room, whatever the room. Like, they're a very distinct item. But you get up to them, and they're not smooth.
Mm-mm.
And I love that.
Mm.
Specifically, the ones that are multi-material. And I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of them in person.
Yeah.
But the wood ones that have you done wood ones that have metal in the middle?
Yeah,
so
I have.
Those.
Yeah.
Did you lathe that or cast it, or is that something? Because you have the contrast of cool, shiny, hard, smooth metal versus warm, scalloped, natural wood, and I really enjoy that contrast.
Yeah.
Do you think, is that a conscious design effort on your behalf?
Yeah, so that is actually there's a pretty direct, like, observational link there. It's you ever see like a knife with a full tang and a wood handle?
Yep.
You know, you have to, there's this, you can see on the back edge of it, there's this transition, you know, from one side of the handle to the other to wood, metal, wood, and, you know, a well-made knife those are kind of executed cleanly.
Seamless, if you're doing it right.
And the, you know, the little brass rivets usually that hold the handle on, and there's just something kind of that I find hard to articulate, but very, very satisfying about those transitions between materials, smooth transitions between materials. I actually somebody gave me an object once. It's the shuttle from an industrial loom. So it's kind of a torpedo shaped object that, you know,
goes back and forth between.
And, you know, it's like made out of like 5 materials. There's, you know, the ends are hardened, the points are hardened metal, and, you know, kind of comes, but then after that there's like some kind of fiberglass maybe, or a composite material, and then there's at least 2 kinds of wood sort of laminated together for the body of the thing, and then there's like some plastic elements, and then what seems to be maybe like some rubberized coated metal on there as well. And it's just like a really elegant object with a bunch of materials, you know, sort of blended together for their purposes. And that I have a small collection of these sort of inspirational objects that I keep in my house. And part of the working with different materials with those candlesticks was just inspired by that sort of, I don't know, trying to do it myself. I like it there. I want to try it.
Yeah, I dig that. And it's really neat that was the inspiration for that mix of materials.
Yeah.
Like, where do you get your inspiration is a question I really try to, I won't say hardcore avoid, but I try to poke at the intention of that idea.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I hate just like blatantly, well, what do you do? And, you know, I try to make this more of a conversation that's a little more fluid than, you know, asking a bunch of pointed questions. But since we're on the note, what other items around the house do you have that you find inspiration in?
Well, there's.
It's like I have 40 of those.
Yeah, I'm trying to. You can edit out my ums and ums.
I'm not. About this. It's not happening. I'm going to add music to the beginning and end, and that's going to be it.
My mom was an antiques dealer for a little while.
Lots of stuff.
And so, really mostly through high school, I guess, like junior high and high school, we were always, like, there was this constant rotation of stuff. Interesting objects. And then, you know, collectible objects that people might want have a certain quality to them. They usually have like a a material longevity,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so they were made, you know, to where they don't just corrode or fall apart after a certain amount of time. And then some cultural connection, often some use or like a context that they were created in, and then maybe like personal or sentimental attachments to things. And so I was just sort of surrounded by those kind of objects growing up. And then my family, my parents' generation was really the first generation to like go to college or anything, like on both sides of the family. So we really don't have any like, you know, it's not like we're like getting property or estates or whatever from, you know, from that's passed down. But like, I have my grandfather's wedding band, which is like a gold wire.
Yeah.
That's what he could afford, you know, to have.
It's awesome that you have that.
I do. It is awesome. Yeah, it's kind of amazing that I have that.
It really is.
Yeah.
That could be anywhere.
Yeah, you know, yeah, he my aunt had that after he passed, and my grandfather and I were really close. He was a lovable but distant World War II veteran who just didn't, you know, he connected with people the way that he could. And really, for just good fortune, I suppose, he and I were really close, and I admired him, and I'm sorry, this is...
No, take all the time you need.
It's all right.
I'm also really close with my grandpa, so
Yeah,
I get
yeah,
it.
you get it?
I definitely get it.
Yeah, so he passed, and they didn't have anything, you know? There wasn't really anything, a belt buckle and, you know, a revolver.
Also good to have.
Yeah. And it was a couple of years after he died. My aunt brought me this, you know, little pouch.
Was it the, hey, I found this in a box and you might want it scenario?
No, she understood. She said, you know, I guess my grandparents, as they came out of poverty after the war and everything, you know, I guess they got new wedding bands. And so somebody has the one he was wearing when he died.
Mm-hmm.
But my aunt, you know, she came to me and no, she was like, look, you know, you and Papa had a really special relationship, and everybody knew which things they wanted, and you know, everything's been divvied up, and this was here, and you should have it. So I bring it with me carefully on special occasions. I brought it to the hospital when the baby was born.
I think that's a very special occasion.
Yeah.
I totally understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it's awesome that you have that, and it's very sweet that you carry it with such intention.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm glad to have it. It's wonderful. It's like, it's a really wonderful part of my life.
Yeah, for sure.
What was the question?
I don't know, and that's okay. We were talking about inspirational objects.
Yeah.
The mix of materials and inspirational objects you have around the house. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
That's where we were.
Yeah.
So the interplay between these materials and their use and how they're constructed is a thing that you find intellectually very stimulating.
Yeah, so it cuts two ways, but you know, as a person who makes things, but you know, I have enough familiarity with the built world that I can sort of see how things came to be. You have this as well.
The built world. I've never heard it put like that, but I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. You know, like I worked in industry, and I make things now, and so you can there are most things, there's very few objects that I couldn't come up with a brief description of how it came to be.
Yeah,
what process.
It's a hard one to stump.
Yeah. And so that aspect of what I create is important to me, And I think it mostly manifests itself in like a real resistance to so my friend Grant, he says, he's an architect. He says, I don't like things that, how does he say it? Things that pretend to be something else.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I try to build in, build in the path that the object took to being is visible in the object. I attempt that. Like let the steps show in a way. Don't attempt to conceal things.
Do you want to give me an example of that? Because I can kind of see it, but I'm curious how you would explain that for one of your pieces of work.
Oh, I mean, it's mostly in the decisions that I don't make, so it's not there. You know what I mean? Faux finishes. You know, there's like staining oak to look like walnut, or do you know what I mean? Kind of doesn't make sense. Like, just use the walnut, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but the work, or like using fasteners or joinery, and like letting those fasteners be exposed and visible, and like, you know, well executed fasteners, screws or bolts or whatever, are acceptable for me. But what's not is like a plastic cover over where the bolts go that has a wood texture on it. You know what I mean?
Because
like,
it's so obviously different from everything that's around it.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
So actually, okay, wait. We can. I have like rehearsed things that I say about the work sometimes, and every time the conversation comes up, I have to first ask myself if any of that is still true. So,
well, good.
But and I, you know, and I have to. So, but in this case, like the object should be integral to itself, meaning that everything that is there needs to be there, and nothing is there that doesn't need to be there. Kind of like this, like the same way you would construct a poem, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, no fat on the bone. Everything it's structurally efficient.
Yeah.
Nothing there that isn't doing its job.
And it came to be in a efficient manner. So this is all of this is informed. All of my sensibilities of making go back constantly to my undergraduate training, which was in ceramics, it was pottery. And once you learn how to deftly touch clay, you can instantly identify clay that has not been deftly touched. And there was a phrase that we had in undergrad, you know, where like you're trying to work some little corner or a joint or something, whatever. And the phrase was kitty lick, which is basically, you know, you lick it and lick it and lick it and lick it to death, and now, you know, you had an itch and now it's an open wound, right? You know,
you worked it too much.
Just fussing at something, and that kind of that the decisions, sort of clear decision making based on knowledge of the full range of decisions that you could make is evident in the piece.
So and that there's an intentionality to every part of this.
Yeah, no duct tape.
Right.
You know,
no duct tape, no zip ties.
Yeah.
there's no backside.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right.
I get that, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of that process for sure. It's how do you ask yourself what serves this?
Yes.
Or how do you trim away things that aren't necessary?
Mm-hmm.
In my work, I have, if it's not just a piece I'm doing just to be doing, then I have an idea that I'm going for. And if something doesn't serve the idea, then I don't do it. You know, there are ways that are best to illustrate whatever point, and then there are ways that are subpar but also do the job. And
right.
You really have to pick the way that is best and most actively and efficiently serves what you're trying to do.
Yeah, at that time.
Mm-hmm. In the moment, every moment. Yeah. So that, like, once I figured out how to ask myself those questions, my art changed a lot because it either became intentionally simple or intentionally complicated.
Right.
Yeah, and there was no in between, because even though I can be just doing, there's intentionality and willful experimentation to the doing.
Right.
And I've enjoyed that, adding that into my workflow and ethos about my work a lot.
Yeah.
It's been really fun.
So there's a discipline.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
It's not me just randomly throwing the brush on the canvas, which I've done, and sometimes that's really cool. But like, if I'm sitting down to intentionally do work on a piece, then I know what the end result is, and I find each step as I find the step I just found.
Yeah.
Because I know what I need to do now, what is between now and the end, and it's a constant, like, what do I do next that best serves what I'm trying to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your intentionality with your process and your steps and everything needs to look like how it came to be. Each one of those steps is intentional and thoughtful, and it serves the whole. That's been a really neat practice to develop.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it.
And it feels good.
It does feel really good.
Mm.
It really does. Because at the end of things, you're done, or you've told yourself you're going to stop. And I think it's successful if I can't think of anything else I need to do to it for it to be what I want it to be. If I come to a place where, like, okay, this, like I said, okay, this is good. If I touch it again, I messed it up, you know. I'll let stuff sit for a couple of days, and if my, passive brain activity that's going on all the time in the back of my head doesn't come up with anything that I feel like I need to go do, then I'm not going to do it, and that piece is done. Sometimes that's been 8 hours, sometimes that's been 8 weeks, right. But, like, sometimes you just figure out that stuff is done.
Yeah.
And that's also, like, that could be really frustrating, but I try really hard to let the passive back of my brain, just do what it needs to do to work with whatever I've got going on. And I really enjoy when ideas come to me when I'm in mindless tasks, or I'm driving around or washing the dishes or doing whatever. And a lot of the time, those ideas are the ones that end up well executed somehow, because my brain just said, "Hey, do this. This is the thing." It worked out everything behind the scenes and presented me with a clean idea that I can then execute. And if that needs a little touch up between start and finish, that's fine. But, like, I've presented myself as something that's like, hell yeah, I'm really stoked on it, because my brain was like, you'll like this, go. It's been neat trying to not only allow active thought and intentionality, but giving my brain its deserved downtime to make some of these decisions that I didn't know needed to be made, or whatever in that realm of thought that needs to happen. Like, there's something to be said for having moving meditation or downtime or something for your brain, just to do what your brain does when you're not actively using it.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Man, if you could, like,
where's the word for that?
Systematize that.
That needs a word.
Like how solutions to problems emerge when you're not thinking about it. It's kind of an amazing. Here's the thing: it's so infuriating, right? Because you can't force it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, it's infuriating. But I try to take joy in the moments when those ideas are presented to me, because then I have the opportunity to work on them.
Yeah.
Because if I don't ever allow myself that downtime mentally, then that's never going to have the time to do it. And rest and work, they have to complement each other.
Yeah.
But that sort of leads into one of my favorite questions. How much of your work do you feel is yours, and how much do you feel sort of comes to you, or you're a conduit for? Do you have a way to quantify that? I've never had anybody say everything is 100% mine. and I'd probably be worried if they did.
Well, now you're leading the answer.
A little bit. Good thing it's in the courtroom.
Well, pick that question apart in a lot of ways. I mean, who's
could.
me?
yeah, we could start there.
I'm not trying to obfuscate, but it's like
you're right though.
The projects, most of these things emerge across time. I mean, a lot of these projects that I'm on now, they're like a year. And so much occurs, and you are exposed to so much over that much time, and there's you go through a lot of changes and moods, and so yeah, it's like a ship of Theseus. As far as being a conduit,
that's the language I've put on it.
Yeah.
Because that's how it feels to me. I don't think all of my ideas are mine. They come to me sometimes from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Whether that be like the back of my mind when I'm mindlessly doing things, or just the sudden strike of the muse.
Yeah.
Or anything in between.
I have some concerns about what else is possible in my creative process. Sometimes I'm always asking myself if I'm sort of falling back on defaults, predetermined solutions that I can apply to a place. And so that sort of openness that you have to cultivate, the readiness to become interested in something new, or to think of how you go about what is the process of thinking newly about something. That's its own. I don't even understand cognitively, even I don't even know how that occurs. And so that is definitely like out of my control. And in that sense, I would say, I mean, from where do your thoughts or interests even arise in the first place is pretty mysterious to me.
Well, I asked Vincent Drake that question, and he's like, "Oh, the nature of consciousness," and we went down a rabbit hole real fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're right. There are a lot of ways we could split this really fine hair of a question.
But let me think about that. Well, okay. So I'm trying to see if there's a avenue. One way that the work is not mine is that like almost everything that I make is intended to be interacted with by a potential somebody out there in the future.
Yeah.
And so I'm always having to account for like the life that the object will live and how someone will interact with it. It's like you could make paintings that like the hope is that they end up in a light controlled storage container in somebody's shell company collection,
right?
You know what I mean?
Some tax write-off thing where it's going to be really nice and taken care of.
Because that's where most of our famous artworks are right now, right? They're in storage somewhere.
Yeah,
and they're being bought and sold. They're not even moving or being seen in between.
But the value is being transferred.
They're a imaginary value transfer path.
Money laundering for some of us.
Yeah. So I'm kind of always collaborating with like a potential future for the objects.
Well, and your clients come to you with an idea, like
sometimes.
Well, I mean, if they have said idea, they come to you with it. Like, I would like this, and then you plan for whatever projected life the object is going to have.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I mean, I'm getting less. I'm finding more. So this is complicated because there are the commissions that I make for my studio, which happen in one way, and then there's all the other creative work that I do that happens in a different way. And so I'm always like kind of having to think about both of those. But yeah, for the studio, the stuff that comes out of the studio, yeah, I'm getting it's kind of been cool, like, but that people are kind of more like saying, we want something really great that goes here. And so my only real context is like the location. Yeah.
But
that's
awesome.
Awesome.
Does that clue you into the function or a modality in which it needs to operate?
Well, you don't, if you want to have a harmonious, let's say it's inside a space, you want the object to be harmonious with the space, meaning like it looks like it belongs there.
Right.
And sometimes, there is such a thing as like power clashing, that's possible, but yeah. And then like I just installed these big, like, sort of, simplest term is chandelier, I don't know, big kind of lighted sculptural pieces. They were for a restaurant, and the restaurant already had all the light it needed. So they didn't have to really provide any functioning light. Right?
So this is purely aesthetic at this point.
Yeah, it's something to look at. But it was like they were going to be hung above some dining tables that were being made by Alex Janes, a woodworker here in town. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to go with each other. There's two big long tables with two big long, two lights that go over them. And so they need to be in some kind of dialogue with each other. And then they had to, like, the ceiling was really weird. They had to be able to hang in drywall, basically.
Oh, that's...
So it had to be really, really light.
Yeah.
They had to be out of the way enough that people wouldn't touch them. This is like a user experience thing that was really interesting.
Yeah. So
they hired another artist, a really great metal artist here in town who you should talk to, Carly Stribling.
We'll get to that question.
Okay.
That's usually the last one.
So there was a precedent, right? So this hotel had hired a bunch of local artists to do stuff, and they hired Carly to make a light to go over a pool table. Mm-hmm. And she's really good. I don't know her personally. I mean, I've met her, but I don't think she knows who I am. But she's really good. And she had this really ingenious way of diffusing the light inside this with fabric. She has this like white stretchy fabric that's sort of like stretched over these little frames kind of inside this object. So it's diffusing the light. Really beautiful piece. But it's over a pool table. And so I went to go look. I kind of just wanted to scope out the area. I had seen pictures. And I had seen the light installed before it was being used. And I went to look at it, and sure enough, the fabric screen has little blue smudges all over it.
From the pool
being
sticks.
Poked with pool cues. And it's like,
that would bug the
who
ever-loving shit out of me.
could have guessed? You know what I mean? Like, I never would have.
Yeah.
If I were going to play pool there, it would always be something on my mind like, man, there's this amazingly beautiful Carly Stribling piece right above me all the time. Don't hit it with a pool cue. So you have to, like, design the thing so it'll survive in the location. And then, so those are like a lot of boundaries around the work. But then, like, once you have those parameters set, it's wide open.
You're free to do whatever within that. That's the opposite of the scenario where the blank page is paralyzing.
Right.
Yeah, because some people work really well with minimal constraints.
Yeah. And
some people work really well with no constraints whatsoever.
Yeah.
And there's a really weird overlap in between those two things.
Yeah. Yeah, I find the constraints, again, I mean, this goes back to working with clay. It was like, I was obsessed with making things on the potter's wheel and then firing it in a kiln. Those are really, really big constraints. Mm-hmm. And clay, water clay, is kind of an intractable material. It doesn't really want to work with you the way it appears to.
No.
So it's quite a difficult medium, and, it has to be subjected to torture,
Absolutely torture. And very, very extreme like temperatures for a long period of time. Like,
Yeah.
That would make most things want to give up.
Yeah. And so, but I found like that to be, perfectly captivating and interesting. And so, yeah, working within constraints is something that I've always, has always been part of my practice. I enjoy, I find liberating, and I don't know. It's, there's still infinite variations within many constraints.
Oh, yeah. It's just, the constraints then become guidelines. It's not like a rule. It's just an alley you can walk down to the final product. Yeah. So this ethos and this mix of materials and construction method ideology ends up looking in a minimalist fashion, if I can put that label in.
Yeah.
Do you like that adjective?
Well, it's a
because they're not simple objects, but they're not complex either.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line between those, because like I was saying earlier, the form is simple, but when you get up to them, you see all the details. So it's the interplay.
Yeah. That is, I have to ask myself always if I'm, falling back on defaults. There is a the clarifying impulse and the sort of efficiency impulse kind of lead naturally to minimalism, but it's just that, like, well, I don't want to get into the academics of it, but at a certain point, like, you reduce things down to nothing, and
yeah,
you're always
the best part is no part.
Right. Few decisions. The aesthetic, though, I've been trying to step away from that. I guess I don't have like professional photography, but I finished a furniture piece this year that was like a firm step away from that. Formally still pretty simple, like going back to my training of, deriving form from sort of stacking and stretching geometric shapes. But yeah, I mean, I spent a year working on a piece that's like very intricate and complicated, and you probably haven't seen the photos because they're not up there, but
probably not.
Copper and steel and bronze and wood and many little details, and well, since you haven't seen it, there's no work.
Well, the last piece of work of yours that I did see last time I was in Able Trade, you had that metal lamp, double cone.
Oh yeah,
you had that up in the photo area,
right?
And it was on display. So I got a good look at that, and then I got a really good look at the wireframe coffee table.
Yeah,
I think it was, and then you had some candle stands in your in your area as well.
Yeah,
so that was like last summer.
Okay. Maybe? Gosh, those wireframe tables I made in like 2015 or something.
I love them.
Yeah.
Well, that wireframe look is something that I'm used to seeing a lot because I do 3D artwork.
Right.
So wireframe and simplified forms and low poly stuff has always been really entertaining to me as an aesthetic choice.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. But that lamp, it is a lamp, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that was, again, it was like someone asked me to build them a sculpture for their yard.
For their yard?
Mm-hmm, for their home.
Okay.
Yeah.
I assumed that was going to be indoors somewhere.
No, it was outdoors.
That's really cool.
And then I just happened to have like a little bright light bulb on a long cord, and I just went and stuck it in there. It looked amazing.
Well, it's the most beautiful lamp I've ever seen.
And so then I ended up doing 2 more months of really complicated fabrication and stuff to get waterproof, up and down lighting built into this sculpture I had already created. So, I don't know. Does that make it a lamp? I'm kind of like.
It makes it illuminated. I don't know if somebody's going to read under it or not.
Yeah, I think there's probably. I have it in my mind that calling it a sculpture is sort of high-minded, and calling it a lamp is not, and I don't know.
Well, I try really hard not to get stuck on labels like that.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to be uppity or like the opposite about it. Like I don't really, be denouncing of some adjectives and really pro others. Like
yeah.
I just try to simply call the things what they are and
right.
not elaborate too much on them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, anyway, so the lamp. You saw the lamp.
Yes, the lamp is gorgeous.
Yeah.
It appeared to be a lamp to me because it had a light bulb in it, and that's my logic.
Yeah, that works.
Mm-hmm. Simplicity, yes.
Yeah, okay, so that piece, it has a title and everything. So it's called Binary Star.
Okay.
And I made that it was a husband and wife. They'd been together for a really long time, and they designed a home. And they came to me and commissioned me to make a sculpture to go in front of the house. And the house is kind of modest, elegant, and mid-century modern style, single level home.
Mm-hmm.
I went to their house. I interviewed them as a couple of times. I asked them to show me things that they loved and cherished, and it was really interesting. They were like, they were like going towards retirement, and they just want to get rid of stuff.
But they commissioned you for stuff.
When I, the stuff I mean,
yes,
right? They raise children.
They want to simplify.
Have grandchildren.
Yeah.
And so the things that they had in the home, everything was kind of there for a reason. And they brought out, some objects that were meaningful. The one, this was really interesting, was like the guy's father. His work caused him to travel the world for some reason. And wherever he was, he would collect stones and write the name of the place on it with a Sharpie. And so they had this basket full of stones, that this guy had collected over 80 years or something. And,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So let me think about this. I thought about those stones forever, and then I finally went back to him and I was like, I'm sorry, that basket of stones is its own perfected work of art, and there's nothing I can do, I can't improve on this at all. So they have one grandchild named Lyra. Lyra is a constellation. Mm-hmm. So I just went and sort of interrogated this constellation. And it turns out that one of the stars that we've been looking at forever, in that constellation, is actually a binary star. And so I started looking at what is a binary star.
So the rabbit hole presented itself.
I was looking for trying to find a motif to derive a form from. Mm-hmm. And so then I was just going through, the accretion discs and the, torus shapes and all this, all the kind of math, the models that people made of how these work, and just looking for something. And eventually I found an infrared image of Beta Lyrae, which is the binary star system. And it had this sort of figure eight shape. That it was kind of like that hourglass sort of two cones. And one star is a little bigger than the other, and they were nicely proportionate to each other. And I was like, this is where we find this. Yeah. And so I made a bunch of pieces sort of trying to describe the energetic relationship between those two bodies. And so what I ended up doing is essentially building these sort of spherical shapes, and then taking all those pieces of metal, connecting them to those spherical shapes, then compressing the middle.
Yeah.
Welding all of that up so it hardens, and then taking the forms away. So it's sort of it's the negative image of those two. Yeah,
between those
shapes.
Two spheres.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, and it allowed me to kind of the form. I described the two spherical shapes, but the emergent form came from just applying forces, which is also, it's the forces between the two stars, which gets you the interesting shape. So it was sort of
metaphorical to nature
in
some way.
Yeah, so I got to let the form kind of emerge out of process of, applying forces. And that felt really good. And then, it's kind of an interesting, I'm married. These people stay together for a long time. You do sort of end up revolving around each other and passing energy back and forth. I thought it was a nice metaphor for a successful marriage. So anyway, so yes, it's two cones, but it's like it takes a lot of,
But it's not just two cones. It's all the forces that took everything to put them there.
Yeah. And when that happens, when I can like find that through line and develop out the form out of that, it's very satisfying.
Do you ever feel like to be inspired or conjure up a physical form, you need to find a narrative through line for your ideas?
No, but it's really fun when that does happen.
Well, so in this instance, it sounds like you found a narrative or a story to work and help you decipher the form that you were going to make.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if any of your literature education helped with that. Maybe it gave you tools to think with or alleyways to look at inside these ideas.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just impose the narrative structure on everything. Everything's a story. Shouldn't necessarily do that, but you can.
It seems this one presented itself to you, and then you gladly accepted it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just using another tool, from the toolkit. Well, I don't want to get into armchair.
You are on a love seat.
So I am on a love seat.
You're two cushions removed from armchair logic here.
Love seat. Yeah. We're we're telling stories all the time.
In some form or fashion.
Yeah. And there's it's unclear to me whether that's always good. Because some of those stories can really get you.
But when.
Well, hopefully but it's that thing like you did something in the past that you wish went differently, and then before you know it, you're rehearsing other versions, right? You're trying to write yourself a new imaginary story for how that thing went, and it can be a big, big problem. It's not everything I do. Okay, I wanted to talk to you about. I had something I wanted to talk to you about.
Please, let's get into it.
So I'm in the middle of a crisis. Is it about time to wrap up?
We're at an hour and 16.
Oh, that's
the
long.
only hurry we have is whatever hurry you're in. So if you still have time,
I do.
We have time.
Okay.
So this is you're in control of this.
Well, nobody's going to be listening at this point anyway, right? Do they cut off?
I would like to think they do.
Actually, I want to say I listened to full episodes. You interviewed Chloe Melton, who I know, who's a close friend.
I've had her on 2 episodes now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jared Sprecher, who was on my thesis committee when I was at UT.
Was he an instructor at the time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Jared Gottschall, who I had actually met here and there, but was, that's the meeting that we were at.
All of those people I've had lovely conversations with, and Jared, I think, was actually episode 5. He was one of the first people.
Way back.
Yeah. So super kudos to him for jumping in on this wild ride at the very beginning.
Yeah.
But those individuals, and honestly, Jared's episode has been, to me, one of like the model episodes, because we touched on all the things I wanted to pick his brain about, and then just overall, I think that's a fine example of how I want to present this media. But that's enough about that. What did you want to say?
So my undergraduate education was in ceramics, working on the wheel. And it's sort of where I developed all of my sensibilities and my curiosities and about making art, let's say. But at the time, it was like, I finished my undergrad, and it was like, well, I guess open a studio, go to grad school, go to a residence, whatever, go get a part-time summer job at a clay studio, whatever. And none of those sounded good. And my thought at the time was like, well, if I'm so enamored with this medium that I accidentally, encountered, certainly there's more things to be in love with, you know,
Oh,
and I want to learn a lot more about what's out there. And so I did a ton of stuff, and you know, I did that. I learned all kinds of things. I went all kinds of places. I did all kinds of things, and I sort of have had like that interest sitting there latent for a long time. And then sometime last year I got some advice that like if you're facing burnout or lack of creativity or whatever in your field, it's there's like a good standard piece of advice is to take a class in your field. And so I took a 6-week introductory pottery course at Mighty Mud Clay Studio just a few months ago. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Mighty Mud. The place is awesome.
I had Chloe Getz on the other day.
Okay. Yeah.
Or Callie Getz.
Callie, yeah. I don't know her personally, but I've been in her studio.
Yeah, she's got a spot at Mighty
Mud. So I did that. And you know, I'm not an introductory potter, but I took the introductory course and like, you know, went in with like, I'm just going to try to pretend I'm learning this new, and like sat through the demos, you know what I mean?
Did you get some funny looks when people figured out you weren't?
I did, yes. And it didn't take that long to figure it out, but I did really learn. I mean, it's just like some little technical stuff that I only ever learned it from my one pottery instructor, you know, whatever, 20 years ago.
So somebody else teaching you things now taught you things.
Oh, totally. Yeah, like, and little ways of like, oh, that's way better than how I do it. You know, so that was great. But the thing is that I became, the obsession returned full force. So much so that it was like, my thoughts were like, okay, how do I do this all the time? Like, I want to do this all the time, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing specifically this.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've got myself, like, my studio, I'm paid to be creative and to execute things and deliver, you know. It's great. It's amazing. I make, like, a okay living doing that, which is, you know, like a 1 in a million.
Yeah, shakes fist in air in happiness.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, well, yeah, this is cool and all, but I really just want to make pottery. I really don't know what to do with that. I mean, it has lit something up in me. Like, I mean, really, really lit something up in me.
So what question are you pointing at me with this intent? Like, are you looking at what I would do with this scenario, or how I would handle it? Or
no, I just thought it would be like, there's nothing rehearsed here. I'm in an active crisis, and I thought that would make for good podcasting.
Well, if I can give input on your active crisis, I would say dive in.
Yeah.
At least to some degree, because you're going to know or find out real quick what degree or where it stops being healthy.
Mm.
Or at least I would hope that you're self-aware enough to be able to distinguish that.
Yeah.
Now, I know when I've discovered such things in my creative practice and in my life just in general, that I will dive really hard into that thing for a good few months and leave every other hobby in the dust until I've got my fill with whatever X is. And then equally as fun as discovering and becoming somewhat adept at a new thing is folding the new thing into the toolbox with all the things I'm already really good at.
Mm-hmm.
So the last 2 years, I've done 2 things that I've been really proud to fold into my workflow. One of them is metal leafing, and the other is airbrush. Yeah. So a lot of my inspiration for the psychedelic pinstripey stuff that I do is automotive work from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Like anything that was hot rod to low rider and 70s psychedelic in between is my bread and butter as far as aesthetic automotive stuff. So I know that metal leafing is used in all these things. I know that all these paint jobs are done with a brush or a gun, and I'm really good with a brush. I need to get really good with a gun. So I bought an airbrush, started working with it, and I started working with gold leaf and size and machine turning, metal leaf and stuff like that. So I've got a couple pieces from the last 18 months that have incorporated literally every skill that I have that I've tried to incorporate since I took becoming an artistic person and my creativity seriously. And I'm super proud of that piece, and it's got a hefty price tag on it because, by God, it deserves it.
Yeah.
And I display it as often as I possibly can because I'm really proud of it. It may never sell, but that doesn't matter. I'm really proud of that piece because I can point at that thing and say, out of all the physical things that I can do that are creative, every one of my skill sets is represented on that one canvas. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
But there becomes a lull between when everything is integrated as one toolkit and then I learn the new thing.
Yeah.
So it's cyclical no matter how infrequent the cycles are.
Okay, so the thing about, I think part of what I find so compelling about working with clay is like the assumption that this is a lifelong project and that I will never capture all of my skill in a piece, and then it will always be like, I don't really get attached to the things, you know what I mean? Like I actually don't get attached to my work in my studio. I have the same approach to my studio. Like, I'm going to do the best I can on this one, of course, and push myself. But
it sounds like you're more attached to the effort and the intention than you are the physical object.
Totally. Yeah. And so, but the clay work is so easy to, there's spontaneity in working with clay that those candlesticks were like trying to get some spontaneity, and it is, right? So those, I'm making those, I rough out the wood and then I shape them with a bandsaw. And, you get, I'm curves and, there you get into a flow with it, but, there's a spontaneity that's possible in working with clay that's just, you can't beat that I'm aware, or I'm sure you can actually, but, that's more spontaneous.
It's endemic to clay. It's inherent to that medium specifically.
Yeah, and it records your motions in it. So like trying to make a pot, it's like it's not so much like playing a song. It's like the whole gig. Because you have to have a whole big plan
to do that
and expertise,
thing.
Yeah. But you set up this whole thing to have the one moment, right?
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, it's just so compelling. What are you laughing about?
Well, so I'm laughing because Callie and I were talking about how pottery was like jazz.
Yeah.
And how there's a flow to it, and the constraints are what help you guide the form, and like we were talking earlier, the constraints give you the room to play. And she and I were talking about how it is like jazz in the way that there is a zen and a flow and a structure, even as incomprehensible as it may be. There's a rhyme and reason to everything, even though it may come in a different order every time, even though every piece is different. Everything is unique and organic every time. But there is a similarity to the whole process.
Yeah.
Like everybody on stage that plays jazz knows what they're doing, but then they never have to talk about it with each other if they're a tight band.
Right.
They just get up there and go do it, and everybody is there for that moment.
Yeah.
They're there to play. And I think likening something to jazz is an excellent metaphor because it recognizes the interplay between thoughtful intentionality and moving meditation and the zen of the process. And I'm really interested in where people like yourself find zen in the process, because I know how I get mine. I can tell you exactly how I get mine. But that doesn't matter because yours is yours.
Yeah, so that's part of the crisis. You know, my studio, you know, I'm generating like work I'm really proud of. And it's really building in complexity. And people are entrusting me to take on kind of bigger stuff. And
novelty is one of my favorite things.
Novelty.
I call complexity novelty.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. And so, right, definitely. You know, they're new every time. Yeah. So, and I'm really proud of that. The downside, there's downsides to anything, you know, there's no like utopian situations, just trading things off. So on the one hand, I have like the sort of stability of these long-term projects. What I trade off is spontaneity, and which I don't, not spontaneity so much. I don't get a lot of flow state with my projects.
But I'm going to interrupt you right here because I feel like this is a really important question.
Okay.
You stated already that you allow yourself time for experimentation
in
your workflow. So is this the flip side of that coin?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I get the time for experimentation, but then, you know, you have to, I have this is internal to me. I need to deliver.
Right.
And then really I turn into like a project manager, you know, and I have that skill set, and that's part of what I think sort of distinguishes me in my studio is that I can organize and deliver, you know. You know, there's a expectation for artists to be kooky.
A little bit,
and
yeah.
And I am not kooky.
Doesn't help that a lot of people perpetuate that stereotype.
I know. I'm a professional.
So much so that most people assume artists aren't business minded or type A-ish.
But you know, like it occurred recently, so I'm in the middle, almost ready to install a large fiber optic star field into the ceiling of a house, and it is 18 feet by 18 feet.
That's a really big, yeah.
It is about 2,000 points of light that are all.
Is this a master bedroom?
No, it's an indoor theater.
Okay, that also makes sense.
It is a distillation of the actual night sky on a certain day of the year, oriented to the house with, you know, different brightnesses of fiber optics matched to the apparent magnitude of visible stars in the sky.
That's a lot of parameters.
And there is like 14 miles of fiber optic in that ceiling, because the lines of the fibers have to go, you know, from where you see it up behind the ceiling, piped across the room and out into another room where the light source is.
Yeah. How far is that, just for my mechanical curiosities?
Oh, it's in an adjacent room.
Okay.
But, you know, if it's an 18 feet by 18 feet.
Right.
You've got to come across and then just up and down into the next room. So one task in that project was unspooling the lines and cutting them to length and organizing them. This whole ceiling's made out of panels because it's in an upstairs. They're smallish panels because it's in the upstairs room. I have to get it up there, right? In pieces.
How big are the panels?
42 inches by 42 inches.
Okay.
And so one of the tasks was, you know, we've got like panel 1 has 32 15-meter lengths of diameter 1 and 21 lengths of diameter 2 and 7 lengths of diameter 3.
And are all those coordinated with different light sources?
No.
Is everything one light source?
There's 5 light sources that serve the whole ceiling. But that is something we can sort out later. And we do. But for this task, so I've got, you know, my spreadsheet, I've got the reels, you know, and they come in 6,000 meter reels.
I didn't know that.
I've got the reels, and then I've got like this analog fiber spool counter, right? And, you know, I was full-time and I I hire people for help all the time. This was one of those. It was like, oh no, I am going to go to another universe while I do this.
This
work.
is the perfect hierarchy of organization
you
want to dive into.
I was in there for about 2 weeks, all day, just unspooling cable
trimming
to a certain length,
and...
cut it, bundle it together, blah blah blah. That was my full-time job.
So your type A was in full force.
Oh man, so relaxing, so calm. Like just, one of my tasks growing up was we had a wood stove and we'd have 8 cord of wood dumped out of a dump truck, and it was my job to stack it.
Split and stack it. Yeah,
loved that job. And I was just bliss, pure bliss. Just
well, that's some of that mindfulness, moving meditation type task that you could get lost in.
Great, but the projects that I'm doing, they just don't have that much of it. It's really hard for me to find the time where I can just become absorbed in my work. It's very consequential. A lot of times it's like the projects are very highly engineered. I'm glad you brought up the candlesticks, because I just gave myself, this is like this little game where I can just, seek variations in the moment, and that's a nice deviation from that. But
I also enjoy that you usually display them in sets of 3.
Yeah. Well, that's how they look, right?
Yeah.
I design them in groups of 3, and I create them in groups of 3. So yeah, that's a little bit of the work in my studio. Is there are aspects of it that are not optimal, and then I have another artistic interest that I'm in where every aspect of it feels optimal, but it's just like the one is my profession and that I make a living from, and the other is, like a hobby. And I don't know whether to keep the hobby work personal and sort of hide it and, pursue it quietly as a companion, or to sort of try to funnel it into what I do already. It's really, really hard to, everybody wants to work in clay. There's a million people out there, and they're also not only are there a million clay workers, there are high percentage of those people are very, very good at it. Yeah. So it's so I'm like, I have this thing that I'm obsessed with, and I don't know what to do with it right now.
You catch me giving you this smirky ass smile right now. I've had this problem, and how I worked with this problem, because I did not solve it, there is no solution for it, is at some point I could not keep them separate. Yeah. So I had to, in some small way, incorporate the hobby thing into the art thing. Mm-hmm. And example of that in my life is that I really enjoy digital manufacturing. 3D printing is really fucking cool. Yeah, it is. And where I've found the most practical application of that in my painting or art or things that aren't specifically 3D in nature is that I've used that machine and my skills in this arena to make tools and stencils and stamps and supporting items for my paintings or whatever it is else. That's been really helpful, being able to make my own stamps, tools, stencils, whatever. Yeah. It's been extremely helpful. And recently, last summer, Max actually helped me by scanning my face. And then I 3D printed my face. Cool. And I painted it to match a canvas that I prepped. And then I stuck my face on the painting. And that was also another what's the word? Cumulative? Yes. Representation of some skills that I'd been wanting to tie together for a really long time. Yeah. And I feel that first attempt was a really good first attempt. And now I'm working on the second iteration of this this assembly of skills. Yeah. So I'm going to get a better scan of my face, and I'm going to get a bigger painting, and I'm going to put them together, and then we'll see what happens next.
Okay.
But
so your advice would be to attempt to integrate the thing that I'm curious about into
absolutely
ongoing projects,
but only after you cannot do it anymore. Like when you're just like, God, I want to put this shit in and do the things together, then do it.
Okay.
Because I feel like by then you'll be frustrated enough and have plenty enough ideas, you'd know how these things would work together. Because you've spent all this time doing it, and then you know where you would like to put this thing into that thing. And by then, when you're frustrated with it, I feel as if you'd have a pretty good handle on how those would integrate. Like the thing that comes to me off the top of my head, did you make some torched finished ashtrays?
Like little bowls?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was an attempt, like, I really love round vessels. It's just like, there's, I've done that a little bit.
So if that was indeed an ashtray and not a vessel, then maybe like a clay basin or something in the bottom of that, so you don't continue to scorch the wood with the cherries you drop off your cigars or what have you.
Right.
So that would be...
No, that doesn't sound good at all.
That's just where my mind goes.
Right. But an example.
Yeah. But that's sort of how my brain has put together the painting and the 3D printing,
But I've already been doing that. Like that's the thing. I've tried this. Like, so those curved wood veneer lights, right? Like I really liked working on the wheel for a long time, was working with porcelain. So trying to make like translucently thin porcelain.
Terribly difficult.
Yeah, I could do it. I'm fairly good at working with clay. And then the game was like very tall cylinders that are, translucent. Okay. And then it was very tall cylinders that are then like disrupted to the point that they seem like they should collapse, right? And so to like build this kind of like wobbliness in them.
It just looks like it shouldn't be what it is.
Yeah, or like a little wonky, like, and, those ash wood veneer cylinders, I mean, you take a photo of those and turn them upright, and then I showed you my ceramic work from like 15 years ago. It's like, they're the same. It's like trying the same thing. Like those veneers are ultra thin and they're like working with paper and glass at the same time, and they're sprung in there. So they're about ready to just shatter apart.
Yeah.
And I had to get this like very, very precise, like machined sort of wood rib that I could fit these into. But then when it's time to fit them together, like I do it by hand, however they'll actually fit. And so it's actually, they're very kind of, they're wonky. So I've done that. It's like, if I want to make real tall cylinders that are wonky, at first I have to have the very refined skill to make tall cylinders and then make them, and so it's like I'm doing that with the work already. It's like hyper skilled and, try to get hyper refined and then build in a little bit of variation. It's like I've done that already. I'm doing that already. But it's the thing, it's going back to the damn basic, the actual thing itself is better. I like it on the wheel, working with the clay. It's better.
So then maybe this is just a practice to be a practice.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to full circle this, if that's how you've done and you do, then maybe the doing is more important than the done.
Right.
And honestly, most of my pieces are more important
doing
than done. Yeah. And I make pretty things that people enjoy looking at, but I don't make them to be pretty or to be looked at. I make them because I want to make them.
Yeah. So I think what I'm noticing is that, I can't make my living without the done.
Mm-hmm. But you really need to enjoy the doing.
I can't keep my soul alive without the doing.
Yes, absolutely.
I've got to figure out how to keep both of those simultaneous. Maybe, yeah. You're looking at the clock. We're probably 2 hours
I'm
now?
just looking. Don't think anything about that. but if you're curious, we're at 143.
Okay. I got a wife and a baby at home. we should move towards.
Okay.
What else? Was there anything else?
I would say that where was I?
Doing and the done.
The doing and the done. The doing is for me. The done is for everybody else.
Right.
And out of all the doing that I've ever done, the doing has always been for me.
Yeah.
I mean, not like people are beating down my doors for commissions of my artwork.
Right.
But I've turned down projects that I didn't want to do.
Right.
Because I didn't want to have done them.
Right.
And I'm okay with telling these projects no because I don't want to do them. And if I begrudgingly accepted them, the doing wouldn't be fun.
Yeah.
But that's just where I land on it. And I really try to enjoy my doing as much as possible because that part's for me. And that's really selfish, but it's my work, so I need to enjoy it.
Right.
The things that I have to begrudgingly do, I never enjoy the end result as much. But if you are okay with where this point stands, I've got 2 questions.
Oh, yeah.
And then we can wrap this up.
Okay.
So, 1, what's the notepad in your phone look like?
The notepad in my phone. This is from the Jared Sprecher conversation.
I started asking that question around then, and I've kept it up because the varied responses are always great.
Well, I have the Notes app,
Yeah.
which I actually use a lot, where I have like all of my lists, of things that need to be done. And what does it look like?
Well, some people would describe it as a shit show, and others would say, oh, it's a very nice organization of lists and everything in between. So
pull it out right now.
Yeah, do it. tell me what it looks like.
So I have, in the notes, many, many notes in here. But I have one that's pinned for every day. Okay. Gosh, I'm going to get in trouble.
You don't have to read it.
No, I'm going to.
I'll love it if you do.
I was raised very Christian.
Same.
I don't practice.
Yeah, it didn't stick for me either.
Well, it stuck for me in a way that's hard to articulate, and I don't talk about it because it's all of the assumptions, all the negative assumptions that someone would make about you are fair. So I have my this is the list that I would go to every day, and so I have it's pinned. So I've got the categories of every day. Treat your neighbor as yourself. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and strength. Stay present with every moment. Drink water.
Yes.
Plan to eat and then eat.
You have to execute the eat. Yes.
And then I've got it broken down today, tomorrow, this week, the weekend, next week, and later. And
Simple
things
enough.
move around in those categories, and one of my favorite tasks is moving things to the later.
I believe that.
Which I realize is this means I may actually, you know what? I just did one of those later tasks today.
What later task did you do?
I paid my accountant.
Hey, yep. You got to keep those people happy.
Yeah, and
so would you say it's a mix of order and chaos, or is it just all chaos in there?
No, it's fairly orderly. I mean, I'm married to a really orderly person, so I always look very chaotic in comparison.
Oh, that way. Okay.
Yeah. But no, I'm fairly. Again, yeah, it's hard because I live with my wife is. I resist saying this because there's a kind of a paternal whatever sounding well, I wouldn't be possible without this little lady right here, that men do, but my wife is truly better than me at everything and a better person than I am.
Good thing that's on record.
No, and everyone who knows me and my wife knows that that's true. But she's just very diligent. She thinks really quickly. She organizes quickly. And so I just look like a total chaotic mess next to her. But no, I'm a fairly orderly. I mean, I have my tasks broken down into today,
That is very orderly
tomorrow,
logic.
this week, the weekend, next week. You know, that's pretty
My
good.
notepad doesn't look like that.
No.
No, it's like straight chaos. between notes and hand scribbled pictures, yeah, it's chaos.
Well, yeah, I think the business, the studio, has requires a lot of organization.
I would hope so. Whether it forces you to execute that or not is on you, but it seems you accomplish such tasks.
I do, and also, I mean, part of how I try to distinguish myself is that I'm a reliable professional, and my work has to coordinate with other people who work against schedules with budgets, and and that's kind of, I owe that to the world.
Yeah, I would agree.
To do that,
there are expectations need to be met.
Yeah.
And last question.
Okay.
If you were to suggest 1 to 3 people to sit in your seat, and talk to me that perhaps you would like to listen to or would like to put on a spot in front of a microphone, who would they be?
Well, there's like the open. You could probably enjoy talking to almost anybody who has a membership at Able Trade.
Yeah.
I mean, you could enjoy talking to almost anybody, but almost anybody in my shop.
Yeah.
Because there's people are doing a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah, there's a variety of work in there for sure.
Yeah, I would say you should talk to Daniel Clay.
I actually have him on the schedule for sometime this month.
Great.
I think. Yeah.
Specifically in Able Trade. I think you might enjoy a conversation with Brett Burdick. Do you know who that is? Mm-hmm. He's an inventor.
Yeah.
He lives here in town. He's also an artist, but he's kind of like a whatever, casual self-discovery.
Does whatever he likes.
Yeah, but professionally, he's an inventor and he makes things and develops products and sells them, but he does it on his own.
Well,
right here in Knoxville.
Hell yeah.
So I don't know if that counts as art, but I mean, what he does is very, very interesting to me. And then you should talk to Alicia Mann.
Yeah, don't know that name either.
Alicia is an artist who I respect and admire greatly, and I admire her work. She currently has a studio at Relay Ridge.
Mm-hmm. So she's a printmaker.
She is.
Excellent.
And she works at the university. She manages the print shop.
Okay. She might know Shannon Ferguson. It's one of the print graduate students that I had.
I'm sure she knows all the graduate students.
Yeah.
So that was 3,
Shannon,
right?
I had Shannon. I was actually editing some of her episode last night, so that'll be awesome.
Oh, actually, you know what? You said 3, but there's one more.
Run it. Let's go.
I would love somebody to get Stephen Friedlander on a microphone for a while. Have you invited him?
I have not, but if things that we are both involved in continue to progress, I really want to bend that man's ear.
He's an interesting guy.
He definitely seems like one, and he seems like he would be able to talk about it really well, too.
Yeah.
He seems like a very articulate individual, and I really enjoy talking to people like him.
He's very articulate, and he has has class. Like he's but not not.
He's not pretentious.
No, he's a very respectable and admirable person.
Well, when I met him, you saw me meet him the
other
day.
Okay, you guys didn't already know each other?
I had no idea who he was before the day. And he seemed like he was a very well-rounded individual that knew exactly what he wanted to say and was very comfortable in how he wished to say them. Yeah. And I really admire that in a person. So I definitely want to get him in your seat.
Okay.
For sure. All right. Well, Joshua, thank you very much. This has been the latest episode of the KAAMP. Oh, tell people where to find you on the internet.
Sure. My studio is called Bapo Design. You could put that into
it's a BAPO.
Bravo, Alpha, Papa, Oscar.
There we go.
Bapo Design. I have a website, That is that. And then on an Instagram account, that is that. I don't post a lot, but the photos are good and
Indeed they are.
show my work. And then I joshshorey.com, which is, I sort of bifurcated my identities at some point, and I kind of regret it. But there's a work that I do outside of Bapo is there.
Okay. So whatever that is, you'll find it there.
Yeah.
Sweet.
You can see performance art that I've done, and sculptural installations, and video work, and
is this like way back stuff or recent stuff?
I think the newest piece on there is what's way back? I don't know.
College?
2019, 2020?
That's way back in this context? Okay.
I don't know. But yeah, I had we didn't talk about this.
That just means you'll have to come back.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I possibly might have enjoyed talking about doing performance art and video more than candlesticks. Well, I need to think about that.
Sounds like we've got something to look forward to there.
Yeah.
All right. Now, this has been the latest episode of the KAAMP. That is the Knoxville Area Artist Networking Platform podcast thing. There's a Discord under the same name if y'all want to talk to other people about your artwork and have a safe space on the internet to do so. With a distinct lack of cynical assholes. Yes, correct. This is a program on the Podnuga Network. Thanks to Michael and the crew again for picking me up and helping this show reach more ears. If you really want to support the show, there are a couple ways to do that. You could buy my artwork at TTW Artworks, TTW_artworks on the Instagram. Yeah. Putting money in my pocket that way is the best way to make sure that this programming continues. And it also lets me know that you like crazy psychedelic art. So that's great. If you want to support the folks that are featured on this program, you should go to their websites, traffic their medias, buy some things if you so choose. But at least give them a shout out, tell them you heard them here and you really like the work. I'm sure they would enjoy that. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and I will talk at you next time. Y'all have a good one.